let's look at the last chapter of our Form 5 syllabus, Chapter 6, Variation. Now, what comes into your mind when you hear about this term, variation? Basically, talks about the differences among organisms. So why is it important? Why must we be all different, even though among the same species? Now let's look at this example. Now we have a species of fish here. So with different patterns on your body. Now, which one would be able to survive better in this environment? Now, is it variety P, Q, or R? Now, definitely, because of the variation among these species, P and Q survive better in this environment, and not Q and not R. It is because R is easily spotted by the predator. Alright, so as such, why is it important? Now, it is important to ensure the survival of that species, because if all of us have the same genotype, then we will have, most likely we will have the same phenotype, and as such, we will also have the same level of resistance against disease. So if one disease strikes us, so all the members of that species will be totally wiped out. So that's why we need to have variation to ensure that we have different level of resistance against diseases. And it is also this variation that enables the species to inhabit a wider range of habitat. Now, so we have people with fair skin. We also have people with very dark skin. Now, people with dark skin, they are able to produce more melanin. So that's why they might be able to survive better if, let's say, the UV concentration of the sunlight increases. Now, let us look at the type of variation. There are two types of variation as shown in this mind map: the continuous variation and the discontinuous variation. So what are they? Let's look at this table. Now, as suggested by the name, continuous. Continuous means this variation shows a complete gradation from one extreme to the other extreme. So what do we mean? What do we mean by this? So taking the body mass, for example, we have people which is very, very light. We also have people which is very, very heavy. So if you collect their mass and plot the mass of the, let's say, the whole population of human being, on this graph, then you will discover that they follow this distribution known as normal distribution. So we have people that are very light, people that are very heavy, and we also have people with intermediate weight or body mass. So it shows a complete spectrum of body weight here, from one extreme to the other extreme. Okay, so that's why we name this variation as continuous. Now, what about this continuous variation? There is no intermediates between the variation. For example, taking types of fingerprints, for example, we have people with composite fingerprints, hole, curves, and loops. However, there is no intermediate between composite and hole. There is also no intermediate between curves and loops. So as such, this variation is known as discontinuous variation. Now let's look at the example, the example of continuous variation. Height, for example, we have people who are very tall. We also have people who are very short. However, most of us have the intermediate height. Intelligence is also an example of continuous variation. We have people who are really, really smart. We also have people who have low level of, let's say, IQ. Now, but most of us have the intermediate level of an intelligence. All right. So let's look at this table. Now, continuous variation. It shows a complete gradation from one extreme to the next, and it has many intermediates between the two extremes. So if you plot the graph, that graph is known as normal distribution. And because it is definitely, this variation is determined by genetic factors. However, it could also be influenced by the environmental factors. Taking body mass, for example, if you eat more, if you have more source of food, then most likely you will gain heavier. If you are given the right exposure, given the right education, maybe you could be more intelligent than the other people. So this type of variation cannot be inherited. So don't take it for granted, saying that your parents are professional, then you will be one day a professional. If you don't work hard, if you don't mix with the right people, if you don't if you don't turn your dream into actions, then you are not smart. Now let's move on to the discontinuous variation. And this variation falls into distinct categories. Alright, so there are no intermediates between the distinct categories. So if you plot this graph, definitely you couldn't form line graph. You can only form bar chart because there are no intermediates in between the distinct categories. So this bar chart is known as the discrete distribution. This discontinuous variation is, however, determined by genetic factors only, and that's why it can be inherited. If you have the gene, then you have that characteristic. If you don't have, then you don't have that characteristic. So now let me add in one more point. So what are the number of genes involved in this variation? For continuous variation, it will be determined by multiple genes. In this continuous variation, it is determined by single gene only. Now, for example, let's say there are five genes. It determines the height of our body. So if you have all the 5 dominant gene, then you will be extremely high. However, if you have all the recessive genes, then you will be extremely short. Then what will happen if you have 4 dominant and 1 recessive? Okay, so this will give you your height. You are very tall, however, you are less taller than the one with 5 dominant genes. Alright, so it can be this one. Also, you may have this combination. You might also have this combination or this combination. So as such, it will give you a different height among the same species. Now let's move on. Then what causes variation? There are 2 types of factors here: genetic factors and environmental factors. Now to plants, certainly if you water the plant every day and the plant is planted in the right soil with the right pH and the temperature is optimum, sunlight is sufficient, then most likely this tree is able to grow very, very well. However, if this tree lacks of water, the pH is not optimum, the temperature is too high or too low, then the growth will be affected. So as such, like for example the height, remember all these environmental factors can only affect the continuous variation. So the availability of water, pH, temperature, sunlight won't affect this continuous variation. For example, the shape of the leaf cannot be measured, right? So you have the distinct category of the shape of the leaf. So water, pH, temperature, sunlight won't affect the shape of the leaf produced. Now let's look at the next factor, which is genetic factors. Now, meiosis, we know that meiosis is a source of genetic variation because what? Because you have crossing over. During crossing over, the exchange of genetic segments between non-sister chromatids give you a variety of combination of genes, okay, in gametes. And then during metaphase 1 and metaphase 2 also, metaphase 1 or metaphase 2, chromosomes can align themselves, okay, randomly on the metaphase plate. So this randomness is known as independent assignment of chromosome. This will further enhance the number of variety of chromosomes in the gametes that we can have. Now, next one will be random fertilization. You know that out of millions of sperms, only one will be able to fertilize the ovum. So that's why this will also give rise to the variation, because you and your siblings will never be the same, given that the chance is 1 out of millions to be the same. Now the next one, okay, the last one of the cause of the genetic factor that causes variation is mutation. There are 2 types of mutation: chromosomal mutation and gene mutation. Chromosomal mutation is the mutation that occurs at the chromosomal level. Gene mutation is the mutation that occurs at the gene level. Now, let me show you an example. Now, there are 4 types if you look at this diagram. There are 4 types of chromosomal mutation here: deletion, duplication, and inversion and translocation. So what are they? Let me show you using the diagram. Now, in inversion, the fragment, so remember this is chromosomal mutation, so we are talking about a chromosome. So a fragment of chromosome is removed, rotates 180, and then it joins back. So what do we call this type of chromosomal mutation? We call it inversion. Now, next one will be translocation. In translocation, you have 2 chromosomes here, chromosome 1 and chromosome 2. A fragment of chromosome from chromosome 1 breaks off and then attaches back to another chromosome. So this is known as translocation. Now, what about deletion? A fragment of chromosome breaks off and is lost. Yeah, it goes nowhere. We do not know where is that segment. Yeah, it just disappear, making the chromosome shorter. Yeah, this segment is lost forever, and this could be fatal, because if you do not have that segment of chromosome, that means to say that you miss out a lot of genes that are important in the synthesis of protein. So most likely, it is fatal. And then duplication is the last one. Let's see what happens to this chromosome. A fragment of chromosome is repeated. Now, GHI, as shown by this diagram here, is repeated. Okay, so let me summarize here. There are 4 types of chromosomal mutation. In deletion, that segment is lost. In duplication, that specific segment repeats itself. In inversion, that segment breaks off, rotate 180 degrees, and joins back. And lastly, translocation. Translocation involves 2 chromosomes at least. So that segment of chromosome breaks off and then joins back at another chromosome. Now, so if all this happens, it might lead to a few diseases here. Now, as long as in our syllabus, if you see that the name of this disease ends with syndrome, then all these are chromosomal mutation. In Down syndromes, let's see. This human has an extra chromosome 21. In Turner syndrome, she lacks of. Since this human does not have the Y chromosome, so this human must be a female. However, in the absence of one X chromosome, Now she lacks of one X chromosome, so she might not develop the female secondary sexual characteristic. So most likely these people won't have menstrual cycle after puberty, and that's why she couldn't conceive. She couldn't have babies. And then the third disease related to chromosomal mutation would be Klinefelter's syndrome. Now, since this human has the Y chromosome, then it's a he. However, he has the extra X chromosome, making this guy very tall, and he might develop some female secondary sexual characteristic like the enlargement of breast. Alright? Okay. Now, so as long as you see syndromes, then they are related to chromosomal mutation. Now let's move on to this. Okay, gene mutation. Now the gene mutation is caused by the change in the structure of gene. So there are three types actually. There are three types of gene mutation, namely substitution. That gene is substituted by other gene. Insertion, another gene is inserted into that DNA. Deletion, that gene is deleted forever. Now let's see an example. Now look at this. This is the DNA, and in this DNA we have this nitrogenous base. In DNA we have four types of nitrogenous base. Alright, we have adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. A always pair with T, C always pair with G. Alright, so during the replication of RNA, remember RNA copies the information from DNA. So this RNA will copy this information, the information of CTT as GAA. So when this RNA transfer the information to ribosome, then ribosome will join this amino acid to the protein. As such, we are able to form the hemoglobin in normal erythrocyte. However, if this nitrogenous base is substituted, can you see that the thymine is substituted by adenine? Right now, the RNA will copy the information as GUA. Now, where does the U come from? Now, to explain what is the U, then let's look at this diagram. In RNA, there is no thymine. Remember, the thymine is substituted by uracil. This is uracil. A always pair with U in RNA. C always pair with G in RNA. Okay, so now let's look back. Now, since this is A, there's no T in RNA, there's only U, so you have GUA. When the RNA transfer this information to the ribosome will join this amino acid valine into the protein, making the hemoglobin to be abnormal. So if the hemoglobin is abnormal, right now the shape of the erythrocyte will look like a sickle, bulan sabit, a sickle. So we call this phenomenon as the sickle cell anemia. So this patient suffers from anemia, the lack of red blood cells, because the red blood cells produced is sickle shape. The red blood cells couldn't transport oxygen efficiently. Alright. Now let's look at the example of diseases in gene mutation. Now, as long as you don't see syndrome, as I told you just now, you don't see syndrome, then they could be caused by gene mutation, like sickle cell anemia, albinism. Now, in albinism, this organism couldn't synthesize this protein known as melanin, and as a result, there's no color to the skin, to the hair. So that's why they appear white. And hemophiliac person, okay, they could suffer from profuse bleeding due to simple cut, simply because the body couldn't produce the right blood clotting factor. Okay, now I'm sure, okay, this might catch your attention. Now, actually, this is not in the syllabus, all right? No, this is just the advice, to some. It's just a joke. Now, so if you to all the gentlemen, if you get married one day, remember to place, okay, remember to write a word, these 4 words, and place it in your living room. Okay, your wife will be very happy. Okay, thinking that you are afraid of her. But it depends on how, okay, it depends on what perspective we are looking at these words. The husband will start reading from this perspective. The wife will look at this perspective. Then you have that win-win situation. Yeah, everybody is happy. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I should have deleted this in my presentation. Okay, thank you.